Good morning and welcome to Unity Church of the Hills' very first October 2020 Sunday service. You're just in time for your divine appointment, and we are so happy that you're here. It's just not the same without you. Please leave a comment in the comment line and let us know where you're watching from. And if you're with us for the very first time, or you just have a question, just type the word connect into the comment box and we'll have someone get in touch with you. Over the past 2 weeks, we've raised $190 to benefit the AmeriCares Foundation to aid the people in the wildfires on the West Coast. This week, we're focused on the Center for Child Protection. Their mission is to reduce the trauma for children during the investigation and prosecution of crimes against children. They are a nationally accredited children's advocacy center and the only nonprofit in Travis County involved in the investigation of crimes against children. For every share of the service while we are live, we'll donate $5 to this incredible organization. And I would like to offer a prayer. Centered in spirit, we unite in our vision of the spiritual leader who will inspire us to higher consciousness and deeper levels of love and acceptance for all. We trust and surrender to divine order, grateful for our spiritual home and the wonderful gifts that await us. Amen. Now we invite you to just settle in as we begin our Sunday service.
Holy Lord God Almighty.
Good morning and welcome to Unity Church of the Hills. We are so grateful that you are joining us today. If you're joining us live, thank you for being here live. If you're seeing this played back at a different time, thank you also for taking the time to spend with us. If you're joining us for the very first time here today, we want to welcome you to Unity Church of the Hills, and we want you to know that unity is a positive path for spiritual living that honors all paths to God. So wherever you are on your personal spiritual path, we just want you to know that we will gladly meet you right where you are. And if you want to know more about us here at Unity Church of the Hills, just type the word connect into the comments and one of our ambassadors will reach out to you with further information. We want to take a moment here and give thanks for all of our prayer chaplains who are holding space for us today. If you are in need of and would like to receive one-on-one prayer following today's service, please call 512-814-5365. And if you'll just leave a message with your name, phone number, and a brief description of your prayer request, one of our chaplains will call you back today after the service. Also, we'd like to let you all know that our children, youth, angels, and teachers continue to meet in virtual formats like Facebook groups and also on Zoom. We want to take a moment to hold them into our hearts and focus on the fact that they are meeting together and that all of them, we want to hold them in that space and beholding the Christ that they each individually are. You can learn more about our youth ministry at unityhills.org. Also, I'd like to take a moment here. We're going to be talking about this a little bit further in our talk today, but we want to take a moment here to recite our mission statement. It will appear on your screen here in just a moment, and I want to invite you to speak it from wherever you are, and let's speak it together. Let's affirm it. Here we go. We put God first, celebrate life, serve truth, and empower people to transform their lives. What a wonderful mission statement that is, and we are so grateful. We're also very excited to announce that beginning next Sunday, October 11th, the pavilion out in Unity Oaks will be open for you to come and watch the Sunday service together here on our beautiful campus. The service will be streamed to the pavilion just as it is streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website. We will, of course, be practicing physical social distancing, and so we are limiting the number of people we can accommodate and are asking everyone, certainly, to wear masks when moving about. We don't feel it is yet time to approach reopening the sanctuary just yet, but gathering in the pavilion is an important step in our coming back together on our beautiful spiritual campus. Plus, we expect the weather to be gorgeous, but we will need you to RSVP in advance, and registration will be available for that service immediately following today's service at our website. Once again, we want to thank you for joining us this morning. And right now, just like to invite you to take a deep, centering breath as we open this morning's service in prayer. Living, loving Spirit, thank you. Thank you for this beautiful day. Thank you for this wonderful team that is assembled here in this sanctuary to bring the music and the word of truth to each and every one of our congregants in our community who are meeting with us virtually throughout Austin and even beyond Austin. We are so grateful for the technology that allows us to stay connected with our community during these times. And we look forward to being able to reconvene together physically very, very soon in the near future. In the meantime, we want to say thank you, thank you, thank you to each and every one of you beautiful souls that are part of our community and who are carrying the message of love and truth in your own individual lives to those that you are connected with. We know that we are all connected in oneness and unity and in God's love, and that God's peace is available right here, right now, to each and every one of us. So for all of these gifts and so much more, we say thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, living, loving Spirit. And we pray in the name and the nature of Jesus the Christ. And so it is, and so we allow it to be. Amen.
This week's Sharing is Caring benefits the Center for Child Protection. Every share of the service while we are live will donate $5 to this organization. With gratitude, we honor Jack Frick as our Volunteer of the Month for October. Jack and his lovely wife, Mary Ellen, have dutifully served this community for 20-plus years, from ambassador to board member, and almost literally everything in between. Thank you, Jack, for your ever-present heart and steadfast service. Let's hear a few words from Jack.
I'm honored to be been named as the Volunteer of the Month here at Unity Church. It's a great honor for me. I was thinking about this, and it's been such a pleasure to serve. My wife and I joined the church over 20 years ago, and I can remember the first time we saw the property. We came through the gate down here where the goat farm was, and then came in, and my first volunteer job was I was on the site preparation team, and we cleared rocks and brushes and trees, and we were told later that the work that that committee did saved the church over $100,000 in construction costs. We worked for over a year and worked every weekend. Next thing was marketing outreach team, was on that, and also served as an ambassador, my wife and I, for several years, standing here at the front of the church greeting people. And so we figured our time was up as an ambassador, and we wanted to start traveling a little bit in Texas on the weekends. So I told Mary experience. I tried to resign 3 times over a period of several months. The Mills would never hear me when I'd say, Mills, this will be our last Sunday or whatever. Well, he would pat me on the back and tell me, how they liked having us. So finally, my wife had to resign us. And I asked somebody, I said, what does Mills Spanberg do? And they said, oh, he sells jet engines. He's one of the best in the whole country at his job. That certainly didn't surprise me. I have gotten so much out of being a volunteer. The friends I've made, the opportunity to give back to the church, and for every hour that I have volunteered over the last 20 years, I feel like I've gotten 2 hours worth of good and benefit from it. I urge you to volunteer and sign up with something and begin to give back. Thank you.
You can watch Jack's full-length video on our website, and thank you, Jack, for all of your service. We've moved the long format of announcements to a video that we posted this past Friday, and moving forward, we'll use this space to run through the highlights quickly and to cover any last-minute announcements that we missed in the video. We will also replay the video at the end of the service for those who want to stick around. All event details can be found on our website, unityhills.org. So let's run through them quickly. Join our prayer chaplains today at 1 p.m. for our virtual Gratitude Circle. Next Wednesday, October 7th, is the last day to register your team for the pumpkin decorating contest. Our painted rocks are ready for rock adoption, and they'll decorate our community garden. The garden dedication takes place on Sunday, October 11th at 1 p.m. We'll film the dedication and share it on October 18th. However, because this is an outdoor event, you are welcome to come by and join us for the dedication. The 3-week Staying Healthy and Connected series begins on Thursday, October 8th at 7 p.m., and there is still time to register. Our 5-week Unity prayer class, taught by licensed Unity teacher Anita Farrell, begins on Tuesday, October 13th. It can be taken for credit or merely for the sake of learning more about affirmative prayer. We have a special in-person service, Answering the Call, taking place on Friday night, October 16th at 7 p.m. on the pavilion. There will also be a grounding activity on the pavilion the week leading up to the service and a prayer ritual for you to practice from home. You will need to RSVP for the service. We've temporarily reworked our Path to Discovery new member class to a Zoom format over 2 Saturdays, October 24th and 31st from 10 a.m. to noon. And I've got one last-minute announcement to share with you guys. A new Course in Miracles for Newbies study group is starting up on Sunday mornings, especially for those that are brand new to the course or have only studied it for a year or so. Neil Feiereisel, a longtime student of the course, will facilitate this journey through the course step by step, week by week, with your fellow like-minded spiritual travelers. The group will meet outside on the pavilion in a physically distant circle on Sunday mornings from 10 to 11, starting on October 18th. And so again, those announcements can be found in our video, and you can go back and watch them whenever you need to. But in the meantime, after that rush through those quickly announced announcements, we get to just drop in to meditation. And what a joy that is. So I invite you to gently close your outer eyes and bring your focus to your breath as you allow yourself to arrive in this holy instant. Take a deep breath in and let go as you relax into the all-sufficiency of God. Let's take another breath, breathing in, settling even deeper. In this moment, the full measure and allness of peace exists and is available. I invite you to open to it now as you allow the silence of God to permeate your being. A deep, abiding peace. Like a warm, glowing light that flows out from your heart space and blesses every cell. Allow this peace to fill you to overflowing as you relax your mind, soften your body, soothe your soul. This deep, abiding peace. This peace grounds you in the foundational truth of the universe. Nothing but God here. Only goodness. First cause as love in its fullness, right now, in every moment. Allow this truth to wash away all concern as you commune with it, as you commune with peace in the silence. I invite you to commit to this truth and let it be a gateway to everlasting peace. Allow it to transform you. Trusting in your higher power, you know that all is truly well. And when you are ready, open your beautiful eyes.
When you walk through a storm, hold your head up high and don't be afraid. of the dark, at the end of the storm, there's a golden sky and the sweet silver song of a lark. Walk on through the wind, walk on through the rain, though your dreams be tossed and blown. Walk on with hope in your heart, and you'll never walk alone. You'll never walk alone. It's the time to be strong. Stand as one with me. Let love be what comes from your heart. We can overcome all the darkness we see, and in prayer the past is gone. We can start. Walk on through the wind, walk on through the rain, though your dreams be tossed and blown. Walk on with hope in your heart, and you'll never walk alone. You'll never walk alone.
And that was lovely, man. Beautiful. Great way to start off the service. We want to thank you once again for joining us today. Before I get started with the talk, I want to take a brief moment to make a personal acknowledgement. Last week, if you tuned in last week, we had a guest speaker, Reverend Howard Caesar. And if you didn't get to see that service live or you haven't streamed it, I encourage you to go to our website and check it out. The reason why I'm acknowledging that, besides it being a great talk, Reverend Howard Caesar was the very first Unity minister I ever experienced about 25 years ago at Unity of Houston, where he served as a senior minister up until his retirement a few years ago. And for me, it's a particular privilege and another example of divine order working out that I happen to be following him this week. It was a very special thing for me to be following him this week, insofar as he was the very first Unity minister I ever personally experienced. So I do encourage you to go to the website and look up that particular service. You can also find it on our Facebook page as well on the YouTube channel. So today we're going to be talking about the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And you recall when I was doing the opening announcements there, we recited our mission statement here at Unity Church of the Hills, and this has been our mission statement for many, many years. And we put God first, celebrate life, serve truth, and empower people to transform their lives. And it is in the service of truth that's one of the entryways for us to transform our lives. So it begs the question, what is the truth? We are living in in a particular period in time in history now where oftentimes it's challenging for us to discern for our own selves, what is the truth. And we're going to talk about some of the reasons about how that came to be and how we can recalibrate ourselves to make sure that we're trained in our own consciousness and in the own activity of our own thinking to be aligned with truth and not merely what may be true as in factually true, but in capital T truth. Before we get there, though, I want to back up in history a little bit and kind of tell a story that happened, I guess, close to 2,500 years ago, going back to the Greek times. You might recall Socrates. And there's a story that is told about Socrates that someone asked the Oracle of Delphi who was the wisest man in all of Greece. And the Oracle of Delphi answered that Socrates is the wisest. And this got back to Socrates, and he was troubled by that revelation because Socrates didn't perceive himself to be particularly wise, and certainly not the wisest man in all of Greece. So he began to interview various people that he did believe were possibly wiser than he to try and identify who the wisest man was. And he interviewed politicians, and after interviewing many, many politicians, he came to the understanding and agreement that the politicians were not, in fact, the wisest in all of Greece because each one of them perceived themselves to be wise and to be the keepers of, all knowledge. And so Socrates canceled them out. So then he turned to the poets. These poets were brilliant with their communication with words. Certainly they were wiser. But the poets, despite their facility for using words in an often inspiring way, they couldn't deliver the meaning. They couldn't communicate the meaning of those words. So Socrates once again concluded that they couldn't be wise because they couldn't communicate the meaning of the words that they were speaking. So then he turned to the craftsmen, the architects, the engineers, people who were creating and building. Certainly they were wiser because they understood these principles of construction and engineering. And what he found after interviewing them was that they were not in fact wise because their knowledge was limited to their specific profession, their specific application of truth. And they knew a whole lot about that, but they didn't know a lot about the wiser subjects of the truth. And so after all of those interviews, Socrates had to come to the conclusion that maybe in fact he was the wisest man because he understood that he was not wise at all. He understood that he only knew what he knew and he did not know what he did not know. And that's an interesting entree point for us here. I want to move forward real quickly. Almost 2,500 years later, in the early 20th century here in America, some of you may remember the humorist Will Rogers, who once observed in a very funny kind of way that everybody is ignorant. We're just ignorant on different subjects. And this sort of speaks to Socrates' interviews with the craftsmen who were professionals and masters at the area that they had specific knowledge of, but they were not so wise in areas outside of that knowledge. And it's just like us. Each one of us may know a little bit about a lot of things. We may know a lot about a few things, but no matter what it is that we do know, we can never know everything about everything. That we all have limitations in our knowledge, in our experience, and therefore have a limitation on laying claim to knowing the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. It's curious that, when we give testimony in a court of law, we have to swear and affirm on the Bible, I promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. But I can't actually, in reality, make that affirmation because my version of the truth is limited. I don't have access to the entirety of the truth. I can affirm that I will tell the truth to the best of my ability, to the best of my knowledge, and so forth. But it's not possible, actually, for me to know the whole truth and nothing but the truth. I'm limited in that perception by my own experience, by my own biases, by the own filters of my truth, and even by my ability to communicate. Those are all limitations on my ability to speak and deliver the truth. So I want to back up a little bit once again, back about 2,500, maybe even a little bit earlier, and let's talk about the evolution of truth through the ages, how truth has been arrived at through the ages. If you go back all the way in time, the truth, the capital T truth that we're speaking about here today, has actually always been present. The truth, the capital T truth, is present in all circumstances, at all times. The capital T truth does not need my agreement. It does not even need my awareness of the truth in order for it to be true. As A Course in Miracles says, the truth is true, and only the truth is true. So how did we determine the truth? Well, through the ages, it used to be in the classical era that truth was believed to be revealed. Truth was revealed. And more specifically, it was used to say that the truth was revealed to a certain select, elite portion of the population who had a special dispensation from God, that God revealed truth to them, and then they communicated it in turn to the rest of the people. And if you weren't part of this elect, then God wasn't speaking to you. We had to go through an intermediary to get to the truth. So truth was revealed. So you can see that that kind of path is a little bit fraught with peril, because who elects the elect, right? Who gets to decide who's among the elite that has this special dispensation, the special revelation of God, so to speak? Charles Fillmore once opined in the early 20th century that God's revelation of truth is an ongoing process, that if we make ourselves available to Source, to connect with Source, that the truth can be revealed through us. A Course in Miracles would say that we cannot learn the truth. We can't teach the truth. We can only recognize the truth. Have you ever had that experience where someone's speaking the truth and you just kind of know it, you just kind of feel it? Sometimes you might even get, goosebumps or something. When we hear the truth, we recognize it. But it's not something that can be taught or even learned, just recognized. So God's revelation is ongoing is one of the ideas in play. So move forward several hundred years, 1,500 years or so, maybe even 2,000 years or so, we start getting into the Renaissance era, the Age of Enlightenment, the Age of Reason. And this brought about the advent of science. And in the advent of science, and in those times, we went from truth being revealed to truth being discovered. Truth was discovered by diligent inquiry, by close observation. We could also make the argument that even though we were on the pursuit for truth and looking for truth, looking to discover truth, we could also make the argument that truth is revealed in that search for truth. That if we put ourselves into the position to discover the truth, that actually the truth is revealed to us as we're looking for the truth. You might have heard before that in the context of quantum physics, there's an idea in quantum physics that at the level of the quantum level, that the observer of the quantum physics and the quantum scientific phenomenon, that the observer has an influence on what's actually going on in that activity. So it can be said that even at that quantum level, that it's not just going about its business on its own without being observed, that the observer comes into communication and connection with that and actually has an effect and an impact on that. So truth is revealed, truth is discovered, and that brings us to the postmodern age. And in the postmodern age, you might have heard this term before. You might have even spoken this term before. I know that I've spoken it before. In the postmodern age, we've gone from truth is revealed, truth is discovered, to now we're in an age, all of us were even born into this age, where truth is relative. Truth is relative. This is a path that is actually fraught with all kinds of peril, because we've moved from an objective interpretation of truth to a subjective interpretation of truth. And in that subjective interpretation of truth, each one of us has our own truth. Well, that may be okay, except if that truth is not in alignment with the objective truth, then the relative truth that we're experiencing or expressing may become divorced from objective truth. And then it can get into that area of subjective opinion. And if we accept that opinion is truth, then everybody's got an opinion, and then it becomes harder and harder to discern what is the truth. Dr. David Hawkins, in his work, Tammy reminded me of this week when we were discussing today's topic, that Dr. David Hawkins calibrates what he calls relativism, and that would be the relative truth, at about 180 on his scale of the map of consciousness. 180 also calibrates in the same range on his map of consciousness as pride. And everything below 200 and below on his scale of the map of consciousness would be the energy of what he identifies as force. And he makes the distinction between that energy of force as opposed to actual creative power, which he says begins at the level of 200, where we cross the threshold from pride and relativism into the area of courage. And that the area of courage is when we begin to access our true creative power. And I can remind you also that the root word of the word courage derives from an ancient word that implies the heart. And so it takes our heart and our mind merged together for us to actually progress into the higher realms of creative power. So that's a lot right there. If you want to discuss any of those things further, you can hang out after the service today in the Going Deeper session, and we can certainly address those things a little further. But I want to move into some aspects of A Course in Miracles right now. In many places in A Course in Miracles, it makes the statement that the truth is true and needs no defense. The actual summation of A Course in Miracles at the very beginning makes this tiny little statement, and it makes the statement that if we understand this statement, then we don't need to do the Course in Miracles because we've already got it. And the statement is this: nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Therein lies the peace of God. Okay, so this begs the question: if nothing real can be threatened, what is real? Well, we can make the case that things like love is real. It's a universal thing that's available to everyone. It goes by many different names, many different cultures around there, but the actual energy and the creative power of love is something that is universal and universally available to everyone. It's part of our spiritual path that we come to responsibly wield our creative power of love. That's how we move forward. That's how we progress. That's how we transform our lives. It's also how we set the table, so to speak, for us to experience peace, personal peace, not peace in the world. As Jesus reminds us, there will always be wars and rumors of wars, always. And this is true. We can look around. It's very easy for us to find evidence that the world outside of us, the external world, has never been at peace. Not completely, for sure. There have been periods of peace where we can experience it in little pockets, but the world at large has never been completely at peace. And so if we're waiting for the world outside of us, the external world, to get its act together and become peaceful in the external world before we allow ourselves to experience peace personally, then we're going to be spending our entire lives without ever thoughtfully and meaningfully move into an experience of peace, because the world will always be at war. Metaphysically speaking, that would say that anything that takes me out of my peace, metaphysically, is a war. It's a war for my attention. It's a war for my peace. And if I focus and get attached to those experiences outside of myself, externally to myself, that's a path fraught with peril for my personal peace. We've heard this said before. The peace of God is within. We practice that here in Unity. It's one of our principles, principle number 4, where we connect with our own indwelling Christ presence within, and we go within in the silence. We still the activity of our thinking mind, our feeling mind. We still and put that activity of our consciousness in neutral, and then we allow ourselves to connect from within to source. We go beyond thinking, and we get into a proactive position where we're listening for the truth to be revealed to us. We're not using our mental faculties to try and discern what the truth is. That if we want to know what the truth is, we must go into the silence, connect, go within, still all the activity and the chatter in our consciousness, put all the stuff that's going on in the world in neutral for a little bit, and put ourselves into the position to actually have truth be revealed from within. In this way, no matter where we are, God is. That's one of the things that we say week in, week out here in Unity churches around the world. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. God's not portable. God's already present wherever we go. And we carry that awareness with us. So Unity, like a lot of spiritual paths, we have to ask ourselves, what is the value of a spiritual path? No matter what spiritual path you're on, The value in it, the efficacy of it, is whether or not it facilitates for us, for me, for you, whatever path we're following, does it facilitate in a practical way that we can repeat to have the experience of peace. Peace is the end game, personal peace, not world peace. I transform my experience from within, and then I bring my peace with me into my experiences in the world, into my relationships in the world. I don't have to wait for those relationships to be at peace before I allow myself to peace. It's an inside-out job, not an outside-in job. And so our work is to get in alignment with that. One of the most useful ways we can do that is with Don Miguel Ruiz's 2 books, The 4 Agreements, and I've got here in my hand the 5th Agreement. And I want to read something real quickly here from the 5th Agreement. And this is chapter 5, Truth or Fiction. And he's tying this into the 3rd Agreement. And just to recapture those in your mind here, be impeccable with your word. Be impeccable with your word. Tell the truth with love. Be impeccable. Don't take things personally because they're not personal. It's somebody else is projecting it onto you. It's not personal, and we don't have to do that. Doesn't mean anything about us what somebody else says or does. The 3rd agreement is don't make assumptions, and the strategy to overcome that is to be willing to ask questions. The 4th agreement is always do your best. No matter what your circumstances that you're in, if you're willing to do your best, it will help you to stay away from what he calls needless suffering. And that is the intention of the 4 agreements, to help us in a very practical way to avoid needless suffering. There is no doubt there are experiences in the world that facilitate and precipitate suffering in a certain sense. But most of what the suffering that we encounter or experience in the world is needless suffering, self-created suffering. And so the 4 agreements are a very practical way for us to practice staying away from needless suffering. After the 4 agreements became very, internationally famous and so forth, he came out with a sequel, the 5th agreement. And the 5th agreement, plainly stated, is be skeptical and learn to listen. I want to read something from chapter 5 here, which is titled Truth or Fiction. For centuries, even millennia, humans have believed that a conflict exists in the human mind, a conflict between good and evil. But this isn't true. Good and evil are just the result of the conflict, because the real conflict is between the truth and lies. Perhaps we should say that all conflict is the result of lies, because the truth has no conflict at all. The truth doesn't need to prove itself. It exists whether we believe it or not. Lies only exist if we create them, and they only survive if we believe in them. Lies are just a distortion of the word, a distortion of the meaning of a message, and that distortion is the reflection of the human mind. Lies aren't real. They're our creation. But we give them life and make them real in the virtual reality of our mind. And that touches on several of the unity principles in the way that he said that. He name checks and sort of refers back to the 4 agreements. He even alludes to some of the truths that we learn from A Course in Miracles as well. The truth is true and needs no defense. We got about 1 minute left here in our service today, and we can follow these in the Going Deeper section, but one of the most useful lessons that I learned in A Course in Miracles, which was a challenging one for me to first accept, was in my defenselessness, my safety lies. And that seems counterintuitive in our world where we think we need to brace up and get defensive for something that's happening out here. But it's in my defenselessness, my openness, that my safety lies. But what is it that I'm attempting to save? What is the gauge of my safety? And that gauge is my personal peace. And that if I'm going to have an experience of personal peace in my life, one of the commitments that I need to make to myself is to be willing to get my life, the activity of my thinking and my consciousness, into alignment with the truth. The truth doesn't need my agreement to be true. The truth doesn't need me to defend it, because the truth itself cannot be attacked. You cannot overturn the truth. We can try, but we can't overturn it, because the truth was true before we came along, and the truth will still be true once we're gone. And we can explore all of that and more in the Going Deeper section in just a little while, so we invite you to stay after the service. But we're going to wrap that up right now because Tammy's clock has already counted down my 22 minutes. So we want to thank you for hanging in there with us, and we look forward to seeing you here at Going Deeper here in just a few minutes. So now we have our opportunity to turn our attention to our offering time, the time when it's our opportunity to give of our good, to give of our prosperity, to give of our abundance, and to put it into circulation into our spiritual community where we are spiritually fed, where we can grow and transform our lives. And so I want to invite you, I want to tell you also, let me get my phone out here because this is my favorite way of giving now. You can download the UCOH app at Google Play or in the Apple Store, but the easiest way to get the link to that is just to send text UCOH to 77977, and they will send you back the link where you can download the app for your specific advice. You can for your specific device, excuse me. You can also give online through our webpage at unityhills.org or on our Facebook page, Unity Church of the Hills on Facebook. And the UCOH app is my favorite way because I can carry it with me, and if I forget on Sunday to do it, I think about it later on during the week, and I can give wherever I am. Or if you like the old analog way, you can still certainly mail a check to Unity Church of the Hills here at our home offices. So with that, we have an offering affirmation that we say each week whenever we do this, and I want to have you bring your gift to mind. You may be dealing with the app right now or writing out your check, or you maybe give at a different point in time of the week, but I want you to bring your gift into your consciousness, to see you giving and knowing that you are receiving 10 times and more, pressed down and overflowing. We cannot outgive God. And we have an offering affirmation that we say together, and I invite you to say it with me right now. Divine love, through me, blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I circulate, and I am grateful. Amen to that. We'll see you in just a little bit with Going Deeper.
Has been good to me, brought me from a mighty long way. With intelligent mind and compassionate heart, I took my good every day. I placed my hands in the Master's hands as I meditate and pray. I'm walking and trusting in the Lord.
friends gave me food and shelter, saw me through thick and thin. My whole life is better, and my health and strength. I've got great joy just walking in the light. Yeah, yeah.
Joy in the light, the beautiful light. Ain't it wonderful how the light shines? Joy in the light, the beautiful light. Ain't it wonderful how the light shines? The Lord, He makes me see how He lives here in you and me. Gives me peace, He gives me blessings. Shows me love is the only way. It's the love that we give to each other that keeps our hearts in peace. Oh, I'm feeling, yes, I'm feeling the peace of the Lord. Oh, there is peace, peace in the light, the beautiful light. Ain't it wonderful how the light shines? Peace in the light, the beautiful light. Ain't it wonderful? Ain't it glorious? Ain't it marvelous? Ain't it beautiful? Ain't it beautiful how the light shines?
Reminder that the pavilion will be open beginning next Sunday for you to come and watch the service live streamed. You will need to RSVP, and there are safety guidelines in place. The RSVP link will be available on our website at 1 p.m. today. Also at 1 p.m. today, you are invited to join our prayer chaplains on Zoom to speak your gratitudes. Stick around for the Going Deeper immediately following our prayer for protection, and if you have any questions for Rick, get them queued up. But for now, let's go ahead and speak our prayer for protection. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. Have a great day. Stick around for Going Deeper. Already queued up with a bunch of questions. So the first question came in from Neil, and I thought it was really great. So let me just read it to you. Please speak more about relative truth. It seems appropriate to honor each and every person's thoughts, opinions, and personal truth. But how do we honor them, yet look beyond to the absolute truth?
Well,
what are your thoughts on that?
Great question, Neil. That is certainly a very practical challenge that we all are faced with in our communications with friends, family, our communities, and even in the larger collective dialogue that's going on out there. And it's certainly true that I have a personal experience, you have a personal experience, everyone has a personal experience. And we certainly should honor and validate the path that everybody's on. As you well know, here at Unity Church of the Hills, that's one of the things that we practice. We even said it earlier in the service today that we meet you right where you are on the path that you're on. We would encourage ourselves and others to walk a path of truth. And in that regard, then one of the gauges that I use for myself personally is this personal truth that I'm speaking or communicating, is it bringing me closer to the experience of peace or further away from the experience of peace. If I am communicating something that I say is my personal truth, but it's not bringing me peace, then in my experience, that's an invitation for me to take a look into that. We'll talk a little bit more about the fifth agreement here in a minute, be skeptical. But that's one of the gauges that I personally use, is that if what I'm speaking is not bringing me into an experience of peace, then that's evidence for me to look a little deeper into that, to recalibrate. I may want to look at some things that I may need to release or neutralize. Doesn't necessarily mean that I have to overhaul everything that I believe and throw that particular truth out, but it might mean that I need to refine how I'm communicating that personal truth, because the purpose of truth would be to facilitate a personal experience of peace, in my own estimation. You might have a different estimation about how you apply truth, but that's the gauge that I personally use. Is it bringing me closer to an experience of peace or further away? If it's further away, then I'm looking into recalibrating that so I can have an experience of peace.
Thank you, Rick. And I think that I know you wanted to say a little bit more about the fifth agreement, but I think what you just shared is one tool that answers this question from Hope. She says, it seems the biggest lies I believe are the ones I tell myself about myself. What tools are helpful in rewiring those types of thoughts? And I think what you just said about does it bring me peace is really great, but do you have any other tools that you might recommend or that you use?
Yeah, well, I think that's a great question, Hope, very practical application, and I think that's a perfect entree into the fifth agreement.
Yes.
To be skeptical and learn to listen. Don Miguel Ruiz emphasizes, as he's speaking about the be skeptical and learn to listen, to not just be skeptical of what we're hearing from others in the external world, but he's specifically encouraging us to be skeptical of even our own thinking, even our own conclusions that we've reached over the course of a lifetime of experience. And you know, in unity principle number 3 is that we're creating our reality by the thoughts and the feelings that we're allowing to dominate in our consciousness. And if we're thinking somewhere north of 60,000 thoughts a day, it's estimated that 80% of those 60,000 thoughts a day are fear-based, and 80% of those thoughts are redundant, meaning that they're repetitious. We're thinking the same things over and over. So the attraction of fear, which is kind of a normal thing in the world, and A Course in Miracles speaks very deeply about that duality between love and fear, so to speak, that we're oscillating back and forth between the two, that in the activity of our thinking, that sets the stage for us to experience peace, that Don Miguel Ruiz is encouraging us to be skeptical of even our own thinking. Be skeptical of even our own conclusions that we've reached, because those become predispositions that we think this is the way the world should be, ought to be, because I say so. And if the world doesn't conform to that, then that's an invitation for us to disturb our peace. And remember, all of these spiritual paths, the fifth agreement, the 4 agreements, A Course in Miracles, unity principles, and any number of other truth disciplines from around the world, that their purpose is to facilitate the experience of peace. Their purpose is to help us to transform our lives into a higher quality of experience, to take us out of fear and into the safety and security of God's love, no matter how they're articulated. And A Course in Miracles emphasizes that many, many times, that it says this is only one form of the universal curriculum, and it can only serve as a correction for some who that particular language speaks to. God provides many paths for us all to get there, and these are just some of the strategies that I've personally used in my life to move from my own dark night of the soul, midlife crisis, into a transformed experience some 25 years down the line.
That's awesome. So I've got 2 questions. I'm going to read them both because I think they both come at the same question in different ways, okay? So this first one says, okay, hearing the quote, "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing," by Edmund Burke. It stirs me to action, but my uncertainty about what to do takes away my peace. How do I know when I'm being apathetic or just wise to accept and be at peace with what is? So that's one question. And then this other question I think ties in, okay? What are the touchstones you employ or wake-up calls you try to attend to in your work of navigating the balance of physical temporal world and being in the space where the transcendent real is all that exists? Or phrased another way, how do you keep your head in the clouds and your feet on the ground. So I think those two questions are kind of, I know that's a lot, I'm just like, but it's, I think that it's like, it's basically, you know, Jesus called us to be in the world, but not of it.
Right. That's correct.
And yet the quote from Edmund Burke, and then this question about how do we stay in the clouds and on the ground. So that's kind of encapsulating
reread
it all.
the Burke quote just for a second, just to keep it fresh in our minds here.
The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. So the idea is, how do we know what to do in the world and stay in our space of peace? And then also, how do we stay grounded in the real,
right,
and keep our in the world?
Yeah, well, there's several things that are popping in my consciousness. Tammy knows that we could ask one question and I could go on for 20 minutes. So I'm trying to stay contained here and address the question. So that idea of good men doing nothing, I don't think that anything that I certainly don't mean for myself, and I certainly don't mean by anything that I said today to imply that we do nothing. That we don't take action in the world to correct injustices that we see maybe present in the world, to improve conditions for some of our brothers and sisters who may not have it. That's not to say that at all, and I don't think Jesus would agree with that, and I don't think Gandhi would agree with that, or Don Miguel Ruiz, or anybody. But there's the truth that I'm speaking of today, and the more practical application of the truth is, does that truth, does that thing that you're fighting there in the world, does it bring you a personal experience of peace? That's the gauge that I personally use in my life. Am I moving closer into an experience of peace? Am I having an experience of peace? Or am I not having an experience of peace? And that's sort of my calibration that I use in my personal life. And it doesn't mean that I do it perfectly, but it does mean that it's a perfect gauge for me to recalibrate if I find that I'm having an experience that's not peace. Now, I might have a momentary lapse of that and have a momentary moment of frustration or anger or whatever the case may be, but I don't allow myself to stay in the energy of that. It's like blowing off steam a little bit and say, okay, well, that ticked me off right there, so maybe I need to look at what that was that triggered me at that point in time. And then it's an invitation for me to look into how I'm thinking, look into what I might be afraid of. As A Course in Miracles would say, is that, you know, anger in any form is fear projected outward. Right. It's my attempt to get the fear that I'm feeling inside myself and project it onto someone else. And if I can get to stick on them, then I think that I could get rid of it. But the fear is within me. I can attempt to project it onto other people, but that doesn't mean that it leaves me. I have to stay grounded in my own experience and take responsibility for my own feelings of fear, insecurity, anger, or whatever the case may be, anxiety, depression. There's a whole range of emotions, and Dr. Hawkins speaks very eloquently to all of those energies on his map of consciousness, all the way down from shame at the lowest end to enlightenment on the top end, and that we move through all of these things. And quite frankly, we don't move through them and then leave some behind. We're kind of going back and forth. We all have feelings of fear. We all have aspects of shame or guilt or anxiety that we move in and out of in our life. It's not a linear process, just like the process of grief is not a linear process. If we could just go from the event that we're feeling, angry or upset about all the way to acceptance in a linear fashion, people could get through grief in a whole lot quicker fashion. But as we know, grief is a very gnarly kind of thing. We're in and out of all of these stages. And at any point in time, I can slip back into my fear consciousness. That's a choice that I would make, as A Course in Miracles would say, that we're choosing between love and fear, and only one of those is real. So it's a false choice that we're actually making, because love is the only real choice I can make, and that the alternative that we would call fear or illusions, and as Don Miguel would call it, lies, in that is something that we're creating ourselves. And if we follow those lies, believing that they're truth, we can certainly do it. I mean, I know I've done it in my life at times, but once again, the gauge that I'm using is, how's that working for you, as Dr. Phil would say? Is it bringing you closer to an experience of peace? If it's bringing you closer to an experience of peace, keep doing what you're doing. Practice it, maybe even talk to others and inspire others to do the same if it's bringing you personal peace. If it's not bringing you personal peace, that doesn't mean you can do something about it overnight, but it is an invitation, in my experience, for me to check in with myself and say, what am I afraid of right now? What's my deepest fear right now? Why am I upset about this circumstance? There's not a lion at my door getting ready to eat me alive, so that my physical life isn't under threat, so there's no reason for me to lose my peace. But what is it? That's that sort of grit in the sand, so grit in the sand, so to speak, so that we like, what's irritating me? So if we're going to walk a spiritual path and we're going to have a valuable experience, we're going to cultivate an experience of peace, there's invitations like that every single day, multiple invitations every single day. And to walk that mature spiritual walk and a path of peace requires me to take charge of the activity of my own thinking and feeling consciousness, which once again reflects unity principle number 3. That's one of the key principles that we attempt to practice here.
And I just want to add to that, going back to the quote about from Edmund Burke, was I just keep hearing Mother Teresa's quote about, don't invite me to an anti-war rally,
Right.
I'll go to a pro-peace. So it's like you recognize what's in the world, you know it's not real, and if you're called to do something about it, you do it from that place of, I'm for this, not against this, right?
Exactly. It's like being for love,
It's very different than against fear.
Yeah, being for love is much different than against fear. That's a great point, and it underscores this idea that we literally cannot fight for peace.
Yeah.
We cannot fight for peace. That if I'm engaged in a battle to establish the conditions of peace, I'm saying I'm willing to forego my personal experience of peace until these external conditions are handled. And then after I fight for those conditions to be changed, then after everything's in its place, then I will allow myself to experience peace. And as Jesus would advise us, there will always be wars and rumors of wars. He didn't say always until at some point in time it'll stop. No, always there will be wars and rumors of wars, and he advises us to not be overly concerned by those. That's not to say we don't do something to try and correct and improve those conditions, but that those examples that we would call wars and rumors of wars in a metaphysical sense is anything that would invite me out of an experience of peace. And that I'm to look at those as merely the world, the birth pains of the world giving birth to itself. Yeah. And so there's no doubt that we are in, some turbulent times right now. And to me, it's evidence that we're about ready to crack through to the evolution into a new level of our experience. And while we should advocate for those things that we, believe could be improved, conditions that we could be improved, we need to communicate that advocacy in a way that is still conscious of our unity, of our divine unity, of our divine oneness. And once again, name checking back to Howard Caesar's talk last week, it was titled The Most Important Thing. And the underscored idea in that the most important thing is oneness. Yeah. The most important thing is unity. And that our job is to wrap our minds, our hearts around how can I cultivate an experience of oneness and unity for myself, for those in my community, and by extension, the world at large. And Mother Teresa is exactly right, that we show up to a pro-peace rally, we're advocating for peace, not against war. Yeah. One of the physical laws of science is for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So if we're protesting against something, there's going to be another reaction against that. And once again, in my defenselessness, my safety lies, but my safety is about my personal peace. Neutrality, Dr. Hawkins talks about neutrality, which we're at the level of courage as a collective calibration now, so we've moved in collectively into creative power, and at the next level, the next collective advance up is calibrated at 250 on his scale of the map of consciousness, and he qualifies that as neutrality. Neutrality people confuse as passivity, and it's not the same thing. Neutrality is a very active, creative power. It's a power of non-opposition because we know that the truth cannot ultimately be attacked and overturned. The truth will still be true long after I'm gone, long after you're gone, and it doesn't need our agreement to be true.
I love that quote from the Course.
From the Course,
yes.
So
awesome. So I've got one more question here. I don't know if anybody else has a question, but I'm going to ask this question, and then maybe if you have any closing thoughts. So you stated that it's not possible for us to know the whole truth, yet we're told in the 4 agreements to not make assumptions. So how can we fill in the gaps without making an assumption?
Right.
Or how do we fill the gap with the quote-unquote right stuff?
That's a great question.
It is.
Quite simply, Don Miguel actually addresses that very question in his book. And the strategy is ask questions. Ask questions. That we can't assume that what someone says is necessarily the truth. Oh, that's very interesting. Well, let me ask you. And you ask questions to clarify so that you're not making assumptions about what you've just heard from someone else. Remember that the fifth agreement is to be skeptical and learn to listen. There's a second part to that, is to be skeptical and learn to listen. So if someone comes at me and they're advocating for some specific thing, and I go, wow, that's really interesting. I've never thought about it that way. Tell me more. Or to ask a question so that I don't walk away from that conversation making an assumption about them and what they said. If I really am seriously intent on finding the truth about what they're saying, I'd be willing to sit there with them without opposition, without fear, without a need to change their mind, but just to simply inquire and ask questions. Tell me more. What do you mean by this? Why do you say it that way? What's behind that? How did you come to that conclusion? How did you come? What's in your experience that led you to that observation? And if I open up into conversation where I'm not afraid to have that conversation, where I'm not afraid to have my own conclusions challenged by somebody else's truth, then it's going to be a much more productive communication. It's going to bring about an experience of connection with others. But if I stand in a place of fear that, well, I don't agree with that, and therefore if I don't agree with it, I'm right and you're wrong, then we're off, we're on a slippery slope at that point in time. And once again, if I'm assuming that attitude, then my peace is disturbed even as I'm speaking that out loud. I'm already in an experience of not peace. Now I want to be right. I want to be right about it, and so I have to talk them down to where they either change their mind and come closer to me, or they go away. Well, we can do that, and in fact, we do that, okay? Yeah. But the question becomes, at the end of the experience, at the end of that communication, am I left with a feeling of peace? Yeah. Was I being loving in my communication? Love is always the barometer, that's always the gauge about where we should try to be calibrating our experience around. Because remember, Charles Fillmore talks about the power of love. It's way beyond just affection and emotion. It's a powerful, creative energy. And what Charles calls it is the harmonizing power. Yes. That as I bring love and I speak with love in all of my circumstances, that I'm bringing in energy, the harmonizing energy. I'm bringing in energy of non-opposition. I'm bringing in energy of neutrality into those communications. And with that, we actually established conditions to actually have an effective communication with one another rather than shouting at one another.
Awesome. I love that. Rick and I could sit here and talk all day long. It is 12:40. I do want to make sure people have time to get to the gratitude circle at 1 o'clock. So do you have any closing thoughts, Rick?
Well, I would just underscore that for me, and I've said this a couple times today, but to me it's probably the most important idea that I communicated today. It's probably the most important idea that I communicate on an ongoing basis regularly, is that peace, for me, is the end game. Yeah. It's the condition that I wish to experience most in this life. Am I able to maintain a perfect state of perfect peace all of the time? Certainly not. But I can tell you from experience with authority that looking back at my life 25 years ago when I was in my midlife crisis, when I was having the dark night of the soul experience, and I did not have a spiritual path or the tools to communicate in such a way, I experienced everything but peace. Right. I mean, that's where I began, in that dark night of the soul experience, where I was completely in a chaotic experience, a chaotic environment, and I did not know how to change my circumstances. And I literally had that moment where I called out, please help me. Show me how I can change these circumstances, because I don't like the result I am getting, and I want another experience. And what I was asking for was, the alternative was to have an experience of peace, even though I didn't really have the facility to articulate it in that moment of chaos and anguish and everything. But the universe answers. God answers. When you ask a sincere question and say, help me, show me then that creates an opening for Spirit to come in and to begin working with you. It doesn't change overnight, but in that invitation and my willingness, it created an opening for Spirit, for the Holy Spirit, for the Christ, for God, for truth, for love, to enter into my experience. And then I become open and willing as a student to learn. And once again, in my defenselessness, my safety lies, because that implies an openness. Show me not how I can have more peace, but how I can have peace more of the time.